Good afternoon. My name is Ute Kreplin. I'm a research student at Liverpool John Moores University, and my research is conducted within the field of neuroaesthetics, which aims to understand brain activation of aesthetic experiences. And the field lacks a consistent use of stimuli. So our first aim was to create a database of images that had known psychological properties. And we did this by selecting 60 artworks from the internet from little-known artists who sold or exhibited their work. And artworks were chosen because of their complexity, or because they were very novel or not very novel, or because they were positive or negative. And the artworks were rated on 6 psychological properties in a large online survey by over 1,000 participants. And taken together, we have emotional and cognitive components that we could manipulate in neuroscience experiments. And our research was interested in the prefrontal cortex, which is an area that is involved in complex human thought. And it's also evolutionarily the youngest area. But the prefrontal cortex is a very large area. So we therefore only looked at the most frontal part of the prefrontal cortex, which has been related to autobiographical memory, emotional processing, and processing of information that is self-relevant. And we conducted 2 studies to find out how the rostral prefrontal cortex, or if it is relevant to emotional processing of visual art. And in the first study, the experience of the viewer was manipulated by using art with different psychological properties. So we took 16 images from our database, and that were either positive or negative and had high or low comprehension scores. So were either difficult to understand or easy to understand. And we showed them to participants for 60 seconds and asked them to rate if they thought they understood the image or how well they understood the image, and how positive or negative they thought the image was. And all our participants were art naive, so they didn't have any special knowledge in art. And as we expected, we found greater activation for negative images that were difficult to understand. So that indicates that participants thought harder about images that were negative and difficult to understand. But we also found more activation for positive images that were easy to understand. So that indicates that participants also thought more about images that were positive when they were easy to understand. And we concluded from the interaction between emotion and comprehension that rostral rPFC activation during the contemplation of visual art is mediated by the viewer's understanding of the image. So in other words, participants engaged more with images that were negative and difficult to understand, and more with images that were positive and easy to understand. So knowing that the rostral prefrontal cortex is activated in emotional processing of art, we manipulated the viewer's experience to understand the activation better by conducting a study that used the same images, but that had 2 conditions. And we showed positive and negative images that were similar in complexity to participants and asked them to think about how the image made them feel, or how they thought the artist had felt when they painted the picture. And we showed the images for 30 seconds, and before participants saw the image, we told them to think about their own emotions or about the artist's emotions, so either look at it from their own perspective or from another person's perspective. And we found greater activation for negative images when participants thought about the artists. So participants engaged more with negative images when they thought about another person's emotions. But when the images were positive, we found that participants engaged more with their own emotions. So negative emotions became more important when we think about another person, whereas positive emotions became more important when we think about ourselves. And it may be that rostral rPFC is an area that integrates autobiographical memories, emotions, and self-focus in order to help us detect threat in others and think positively about ourselves. So the rostral prefrontal cortex is integral to the emotional evaluations, thought process related to the understanding of visual art, and thought about the self-relevance of visual art. And future research may investigate this further.